Goeiemôre. Dit is vandag 'n groot voorreg om hier voor julle te staan en ons storie met julle te deel. Ek glo dat die meeste van julle al reeds gehoor het van Agridwala en ek wil vandag net so vinnig weer aanraak oor wat ons doen. So vinnig oor ons challenges en die suksesse gesels en dan wil ek oor ons storie gesels. Nou, Agridwala is gestig in 2006, 18 jaar gelede, met 'n groep van 19 gesinne, waarvan 9 plaaswerkergesinne was en 10 gesinne uit die gemeenskap van Napier. Almal met dieselfde doel, om geleentheid te kry om self onafhanklik te kan boer. Nou aanvanklik begin ons met die 29 mense en vandag 18 jaar later het ons 14 volhoubare boere, waarvan die jongste lid 18 jaar oud is. Nou wat het van die ander 15 boere geword? Hulle het 'n opsie in ons trustakte waarin hulle aandele kan verkoop as hulle nie verder belangstel in die boerdery nie. En ek dink wat daarmee gepaard gegaan het is dat ons het dit reg gekry om die boere wat regtig lief is om te boer, volhoubare boere te maak. Hulle het selfs my aandeel in die besigheid uitgekoop. So vandag sit ons met 15 boere wat 100% aandeel in hulle eie besigheid het en hulle boer dat dit bars. Ons grootste uitdaging was verseker Oktober 2022 met die afsterwe van een van ons direkteure, eintlik ons besturende direkteur. Hy was 46 jaar oud, het longkanker gekry wat sy lewe in 4 maande se tyd beëindig het. Sy heengaan het 'n groot lemte gelaat in ons bestuur en ons besigheid en veral in die groep. Na die heengaan van Marius Engel het ek net weer eens besef die waarde van om 'n sterk leier in 'n groep te hê. En vandag, jaar en 'n half later, is ek trots daarop om te kan sê dat 'n jong man, Daniel Pieters, sy plek ingeneem het. Hy is een van die jonger manne in die groep, maar met goeie kwalifikasies agter sy naam en regte ondersteuning het hy daarin geslaag om oor te neem as die CEO van Agridwala. En ek is voorwaar baie trots op Daniel. Hy is vandag die rede vir Agridwala se sukses. Net so kan ek ook vir Marius Engel vir Madeleine Engel uitlig, wie se pa afgesterf het. Sy het sy aandeel geërf in die besigheid. Sy is in graad 12 verjaar en verlede week het sy 3 atletiek byeenkomste of items by 'n atletiek byeenkoms gewen, net om vir die gemeenskap te wys sy kan opstaan en uitstaan uit daai omstandighede van haar. En hulle is die sukses van Agridwala en hulle is die mense op wie ons baie trots kan wees. So ek wil nou ook gaan gou na ons storie toe. About a year ago, this story, 'n klip gekap. It's our story with Skarp Agri in Landbouweekblad published about a year ago. Chris and his team managed to take 'n klompie opstelle van 'n boertjie and put that in a book format. And today, it's a pleasure to tell you about our story. But please understand, it's not about Kosie and Lise, this story. This was about God's story and His plan. And I would like to share a few thoughts about this story. My wife often listens to a song with the question, do you have room in your heart for God to write His story? Do you have room in your heart for God to write His story? That was the question that we were thinking of years ago. What if the world as we know it stopped to exist in, say, 10 years' time? If you know that you have just 10 years left to make an impact on this earth and its people, will you still plan that overseas vacation, lend money to buy the neighboring farm? Or will you spend more time with your family, your neighbors, and in your community. This way of thinking leads to a new process in our lives where we made room for God to write His story in our hearts. I want to ask you, Mom and Dad, do you have room in your family for God's story? I would like to ask the business people, do you have room in your budget? Do you have room in your business? Maybe do you have room in your church for God's story? Do you have room in your town, in your city? I would actually like to ask the President, Mr. President and members of Parliament, do you have room in your nation for God's story, that God can write His story in our country? I believe we still have room in our hearts for God's story. That's exactly what we have did with Agridwala and Kingdom Ambassadors. We let God write His story. I believe President Mandela had the same room in his heart too. That's why he dreamed of a united rainbow nation when he came out of prison. And I believe that dream is still amongst us and in reach. But then we must make room for God to write that story. To conclude, in the beginning, God's story will very seldom be about properties, possessions, money, but it always will be about people. In the beginning, it will never be about salaries, wages, and laws, but it always will include relationship, creates respect, trust, and love for one another. God's story will always bring hope. It will restore dignity, it will uplift poverty, and it will create wealth for everyone involved. So as a nation, do we have room for God's story? I believe so. I believe that we were created for this day. I believe that we were created for this moment in time, for now. This is the time to make room in your heart for God's story. Thank you.